Good evening, everyone. This is Mamta Sharma from HR Support Foundation, and we are delighted to bring to you TruTalks for Therapists, the exclusive web series for mental health professionals. To answer our questions, once again, we have with us Nitin Shah, founder and director of iCharge and iCharge Support Foundation. So, welcome, Nitin.
Thank you, Mamta.
And welcome everyone else who has joined us today. Before we begin, I would like to remind all of you to start a watch party on your profile so that other practitioners or other people that you know in the mental health profession can also benefit from this discussion. So, Nitin, yesterday you mentioned that hypnosis is a state of hyperreceptivity, and it is also the basis of comprehensive eclectic therapy. We also discussed that in the hypnotic state, we can create an alignment between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And once we are able to achieve this alignment, we can do things that we choose consciously. We can be able to do it more naturally, effectively, and effortlessly. So, before we go any further, can you explain the concept of conscious and unconscious mind in very simple terms?
All right. So, Mamta, before I explain that concept to you, what I would
Hmm.
like is for all the people who are on the live right now, if
Hmm.
you have any questions that you would want us to address along the way in the session right now, please go
Hmm.
ahead and pose those questions. I'm going to give you 30 seconds so that while I'm talking, I can also probably cover those questions in my explanation. I hope that that's okay.
Perfect.
And meanwhile, if you don't have any questions, please go ahead, say hi to us, and let us know how are you feeling.
Yeah. So, we have one high already.
Okay. So, any questions?
Hmm. I don't think there are any questions.
All right. Perfect. So then we can start. Can you just let me know once again what was your question?
So I said, can you explain the concept of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind in simple language?
Uh, so can I explain that to you in simple terms? Now, yes. So basically, what we mean by conscious is that part of you that helps us in
Hmm.
being able to do things that we are consciously aware of, right?
Hmm.
Things that we
Hmm.
consciously control.
Hmm.
All the decisions that we make, all the what should I say? All the actions that we take where we are putting in conscious efforts,
Hmm.
the rationalizations, the logic, the reasoning, all of those are done at the conscious level,
Correct.
right? And
Hmm.
when we talk about the unconscious, we're basically talking about all those activities that are being controlled by the unconscious, which are happening automatically, which we are not
Hmm.
controlling consciously, and it's also the
Hmm.
storehouse of our experiences.
Okay. Okay. So, so will it be fair to say, like the way we discussed yesterday, how when we set the alarm, it's a conscious decision, but when the alarm rings, we kind of put it on snooze, almost on an autopilot. So, will that be an example of unconscious driving our behavior? Or when we
Correct.
spoke about sweets, the choice to not eat them is conscious, but the craving that we experience is very automatic, and that has been created consciously, right?
So, correct. So, every decision that we make
Hmm.
by thinking about it becomes conscious, and then
Hmm.
obviously, whatever our automatic behaviors are becomes
Hmm.
unconscious. So, what you're saying makes complete sense.
Perfect.
Now,
Uh,
these were the examples that I gave yesterday, right?
hmm. 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 Hmm.
I want you to think about some more examples from the point of view of conscious and unconscious.
Okay. So when I tell myself that I have enough dresses for the season, but the moment I visit a mall and see a discount sign, I am tempted and I end up buying it. Right. So the decision to not buy was conscious, but I had an unconscious urge to buy. Right.
Perfect. Perfect.
And another one that's coming to me right now is, when I choose, when I decide that I'm going to finish a blog today, but
Hmm.
I keep procrastinating it. I decide very, with a lot of conviction that today I'm going to finish this, but somehow I keep procrastinating it. And then that one day turns into 1 week and maybe even more.
Perfect. So these are both good examples of conscious and unconscious interplay. And all of the viewers who are watching this, all of the people who are with us on this live right now, if there are some
Mm-hmm.
examples that you can add, that would be good for us to understand that you are following the discussion that we are having. But basically, whenever you have a client who wants to do
Mm-hmm.
something but they can't do it, or they don't,
Mm-hmm.
or if they don't want to do something but they still end up doing it, that's where the conscious and
Mm-hmm.
unconscious concept comes in.
Okay. Nitin, these are all examples of the unconscious stopping me from doing something or creating a problem, for the client. Does that mean that the primary role of the unconscious is to create a problem for the client or for me?
No, actually, that's not true because the unconscious is also making you do a lot of things that are in your interest. For example, when you're
Mm-hmm.
speaking, just think
Mm-hmm.
about speaking. When you're speaking,
Mm-hmm.
many a times we feel that we are speaking consciously, but
Hmm.
truly, are we consciously selecting every word that we speak?
No,
If you
no,
actually
no.
think of it, you have a conscious concept in your head. That's conscious.
Correct.
But the
Correct.
words and the sentences that get formed in the background, they all happen automatically. It's almost like the unconscious knows what
Hmm.
kind of words it needs to bring together to convert it into a sentence so that you're able to
Hmm.
convey that particular concept that you have in your
Correct.
mind. Right?
Yes, yes,
Now,
very
that's a very
much.
unconscious activity that's taking place. You may be consciously aware of what you're speaking, but the actual
Mm-hmm.
process is taking place in the background,
Mm-hmm.
right? In fact,
Right.
in fact, a lot of things that you do right in your life are
Mm-hmm.
happening because the unconscious is supporting your conscious choices, and that is why
Hmm.
you're really able to do it naturally. So whether it's
Hmm.
brushing your, driving a car, all of these are
Hmm.
examples, right, of things that your
Correct.
unconscious is supporting you to do.
Correct.
Now, since we are talking about mental health practitioners, and obviously people visit a mental health practitioner because they have a problem.
Hmm.
So no one will really come to us for a therapy saying that I want to do something and I'm able to do it naturally and effectively.
Hmm.
From the point of view
True.
of therapy, it is fair to say that the unconscious
Hmm.
is creating hindrances that are stopping the client from changing,
Correct.
right? But the
Hmm.
unconscious is not like, so we don't really see unconscious as that bad, dark place from where all your problems are coming. Actually, we
Hmm.
really look at unconscious as a very intelligent system which is driving both the good and the bad in your life. It's
Hmm.
just driving it on autopilot.
Hmm. Correct.
Yes. So,
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
So I sorry, I got interrupted because there are some thoughts there because we asked
mhm,
for examples.
mhm,
So one person is saying, can OCD come under this? Is Bhavani's question.
correct. So, because there are compulsions which the client is not able to consciously control, to a large extent, the compulsive behavior is being driven by the unconscious. Now, there would be underlying unconscious reasons why that behavior is being driven, but that's something that
Hmm.
we need to work with.
Correct. Rahul says, I want to read a novel whole, completely, he's saying, but can't complete it, and my unconscious wants to read it completely.
Okay, what does that mean? That I want to read it, but I'm not able to read it, and my unconscious wants to read it completely. So, what's stopping you from reading it, Rahul?
Maybe
If you
he's
could
saying
answer that question.
consciously, I want to read it. Yes. Okay. While he explains what he means, Neha says the
Mhm.
client is struggling with negative automatic thoughts, which is unconscious. Consciously, she
Mhm.
wants to stop them.
Mhm. So, when consciously she wants to stop them, then obviously the idea is for us to be able to understand what is the reason behind those negative thoughts. You
Hmm.
can work at multiple levels. You can work at symptomatic level where you can work with using the when then statement or thought
Hmm.
restructuring to see if that works. But if that
Hmm.
doesn't work, then you will need to dig deeper And that's where
Hmm.
hypnosis will come into play. So once I explain the working of the mind right now, going
Hmm.
forward, and we
Hmm.
also tie it into hypnosis, then probably that will answer Neha's question more effectively.
Hmm. And Rahul says, yes, you were right. So consciously he wants to read, but he's not able to. Okay. So I think we answered that. So
Correct.
Nitin, when you say that, conscious is also, the unconscious mind is also helping us do things. So it's also doing some things that are going right in my life or everyone's life. And there are some places where it is hindering us. So we are not really looking at the unconscious from the point of view of the classic psychoanalytical model, are we?
No, so compared to the classical psychoanalytical model, there are some similarities, but there are also certain differences. And we will discuss probably these in more details when we are in the episode related to psychoanalysis, right?
Hmm.
But still, just to summarize, that in the classical psychoanalysis model, a lot of practitioners did consider unconscious as the dark, dingy space from where all our problems are coming. We actually don't
Hmm.
look at unconscious that way. Our understanding is that the unconscious is a really, really intelligent being, and it is doing what it is doing for its own reason.
Okay. All
But
right.
at times, it may end up creating hindrances as well, which is true.
All right. There's something else here. Unnati says every time I want to be productive, but it is not possible. That I know. But if I did not do anything, then I feel so down.
Okay. So, Unnati, if there is a question over there, please let me know what the question is, then I can answer. But in my understanding, the question seems to be, what do I do when I'm feeling so down?
Hmm.
Then the idea is there are two things to do. On days on which you are not being productive at all, then you
Hmm.
can use hypnotic processes to be able to do those things so that you're more productive. But if the idea is that I'm already doing what I can given the time frame that I have, right? But
Hmm.
obviously there are days when you can't complete everything, you don't have enough time, and in that case then I feel down. Then there are also
Hmm.
ways of working with it. There purely thought restructuring can be enough.
Mm-hmm. Right. Nidhi says, I don't know actually what you are talking about specifically, but my question is, does hypnosis actually work and what techniques are used in hypnosis?
Okay. So, Nidhi, this is a question that I would answer going forward in detail, but to give you the answer in short, does hypnosis work? The answer is yes, it works. And what techniques are actually used in hypnosis? There are like a series of techniques, and that I'm going to explain in the entire episode today. So, that's not really a question that I can probably answer in 1 minute, but that answer will come in the video in the session today.
Okay. Unnati says thanks. Nisha is saying, "How are you both?" Nisha, you'll have to explain what does that mean.
That
She further says,
she's asking us how are we both. So, we are doing quite well,
"Oh,
Nisha. Thank you for
okay,
asking.
thank you so much." I'm looking at it from the perspective of questions. Anyway, so she further says the client is mocking and making fun of younger sibling.
Okay. So the client mocking and making fun of younger sibling,
Hmm.
you have to check whether that's a conscious behavior or unconscious behavior. There are places where the client may actually say that I don't want to actually mock my younger sibling, but it's just that when I look at him, I feel irritated and then I end up doing it. If that's the
Hmm.
case, then it is an unconscious. It's almost like an automatic behavior that they are indulging in. And again, I'm going to answer that in the techniques that we are going to cover right now in some
Hmm.
time. And Amit asked, how does anger management work? So, Amit,
Hmm.
again, all right. So, actually, let me take the example of anger because that's a good example to
Hmm.
differentiate between conscious and unconscious. You know how
Hmm.
there are times when we feel angry when we meet someone or when we look at someone's face, or at times even hear their name,
Hmm.
right? And it's not that I'm looking at them and then I'm reminding myself consciously, इसने मेरे साथ कितना बुरा किया है. I just look at them and the moment I look at them, that anger is almost spontaneous,
Hmm.
right? Which means it is being controlled by the unconscious. Now,
Hmm.
when we use classical cognitive processes to deal with this,
Hmm.
uh, one of the things that's suggested to people is when you are getting angry, count 100 down to zero or 10 down to zero. I've had so
Hmm.
many people coming and telling me, Nitin, when I'm getting angry, I don't remember the count, right?
Hmm.
So, our
Hmm.
approach with hypnosis or with eclectic approach that we follow is that while the client has to obviously change their emotions, And for that, they may
Mm-hmm.
also need to use certain strategies like observing their breath or counting 10 down to zero, or they may
Hmm.
need to restructure their thoughts. But that restructuring also needs to happen at an unconscious level, where when they're in front of the person, they don't have to then remind themselves to count 10 down to zero. That should be the most natural response that they have. And that
Hmm.
response can be made automatic through hypnosis, just like the original response is of getting angry. Right? And Amit,
Perfect.
if your question was you're looking at more details to understand how hypnosis will help you with anger management, then give me some time
Hmm.
because I'm going to explain the entire model going forward right now.
Perfect. Perfect. So, Nitin, so we understand that there are similarities and differences. But between the conscious and the unconscious, because we said that sometimes it supports us and sometimes it hinders us from making a change, and that would determine whether we will be able to achieve our outcome or not, are we saying that the unconscious is more powerful than the conscious?
Uh, all right, let me answer this question with a question or a scenario first. So, when we smoke for the first time, or when someone smokes for the first time,
Hmm.
you notice that the body automatically creates discomfort,
Yes, most people, I think, would generally cough.
right? Now,
Hmm.
is the client consciously creating that discomfort?
No, it's an automatic, spontaneous response.
Correct? Perfect. Now, before I go ahead, I want all the people who are on the live right now to also answer what they think, which is more powerful, conscious or unconscious, right? And while you answer those questions, I'll continue with the explanation. So, as I said, the client is not consciously creating the discomfort, right? It's getting created automatically,
Correct.
which means it's being controlled by the unconscious.
Yes, because we have established that automatic responses come from there.
Perfect. So, would it be fair to say that now that the conscious is choosing to smoke, the unconscious is showing its discomfort through that,
Hmm.
or it's showing um, its indication that this is bad for me through that discomfort. But
Correct.
yet, with conscious decision, we are able to overpower the unconscious,
Hmm. Correct.
right? So now, which is more powerful, conscious or unconscious? Because my unconscious told me it's bad for me, it gave me an
Hmm.
indicator, but consciously I was able to overpower it.
True. True.
So, which is more powerful?
It seems now the conscious is more powerful. But Nitin, when someone wants to quit smoking consciously, because that's a conscious decision, now I want to stop, they are not able to do so. So why is that? I am confused. And we have also said that unconscious is the source of hindrances. So I'm really confused now.
All right, perfect. So I was actually hoping that you will ask me that question because that
And
does connect.
while
Hmm.
you answer that, most people have answered unconscious. I have one conscious among the answers. Rest, everyone says unconscious is more powerful. So please.
Perfect. So, all right. So let me explain this to you. And I'm happy that you've asked this question because this just connects to the next thing that I'm going to talk about now. Right.
Hmm.
So the way to
Hmm.
understand this is that we look at a model of mind where we don't
Hmm.
look at only two components of conscious and unconscious. To be
Okay.
true, we look at a third component which kind of lies in between the two. It's
Hmm.
partially in the conscious, partly in the unconscious, and it's called the
Hmm.
critical figure, which
Okay.
basically contains our beliefs and our decisions and our defense mechanisms,
Hmm.
uh, which we have accepted repetitively. Now,
Okay.
once this filter develops, it is
Hmm.
this filter that determines which information will go into the unconscious and which will not. So
Okay.
any information that goes into the unconscious, once it's
Hmm.
chosen by the conscious, the unconscious will
Hmm.
act upon it. But whether that information goes into the unconscious or not is not something that it's not something that the conscious can choose. That decision is actually made by the critical filter. Okay, and
Okay.
that's the reason why when we talk about conscious and unconscious and we talk about understanding the working of mind, we can't
Hmm.
really ignore the critical filter. It is really the interplay between these three components of mind that determines
Hmm.
what we do and what we don't do, what we are not able to do.
Hmm. Correct. Makes sense.
So is
But
this
can you
clear
give
to you now?
us, it is somewhat broadly, but it will be helpful if you can give us, some examples of this interplay that we are talking about.
All right.
And I think people also want that. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So let's look at it this way. When I was born,
Hmm.
uh, was I operating out of conscious choices or instincts? Just after I was
Inst-
born,
Instincts, obviously.
right?
No conscious
So
choices there.
correct. So it will be fair to say that at least just moments after I was born and while I was growing up, at least initially, I
Hmm.
was all my actions were being driven by my unconscious.
Correct, because the conscious mind is not yet developed.
Perfect. So now let's say even after the conscious mind develops, can it really process all the information available to it at any given point of time?
No, because there's so much information coming in at any point of time. So, for example, even right now, so there are things within my body, outside me, things I can see here. I mean, there is so much because just the moment I started saying, I became aware of so many things which I was not aware of, and I'm sure my mind can't process all this together.
Perfect. So would it be fair to say that the conscious would then need some kind of a help to process repetitive information?
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Because yes, a lot of this information is repetitive. The room I'm in, the surroundings, and I mean, so much. The laptop, the way I'm working. So if a helper can process this repetitive information, the conscious, I'm sure, can focus more on the new information coming in.
Correct. So not just the laptop and the room that you are in, the fact that the kind of thoughts we have in our mind constantly, they are also all
Hmm.
repetitive, right? The way
Correct.
we interact with people around us, it's
Hmm.
almost like we kind of live a life where a lot of things are happening in a repetitive pattern,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
so when we are exposed to the same information over and over again, uh,
Hmm.
which our mind has accepted, or
Hmm.
certain decisions that we have been taking repetitively,
Hmm.
then this will become a part of our beliefs,
Correct.
right? So all this repetitive information, all these decisions that we are taking and we are living by over a period of
Hmm.
time, they will become like rules that we live by, right?
Correct.
And that's
Yes.
what becomes a part of our critical filter.
Okay.
Okay. Once you understand how the critical filter forms,
Hmm.
uh, it becomes important to understand how it functions, right? So as I said, so how it forms first, it forms by based on the repetitive information that we are accessing, right?
Correct.
And the decisions that we are taking and the beliefs that we are acknowledging and that we are accepting. Clear till here?
Correct. Makes sense. Yes. Perfect.
Perfect. Now, the next question to before we understand the interplay between conscious
Hmm.
critical filter and unconscious is to understand the role that the critical filter plays. And that role is the role of a gatekeeper.
Okay.
Let's say I have a company, and
Hmm.
in that company there are few people are coming in right now. So would the
Hmm.
gatekeeper be in a position to decide who comes in, who doesn't come in, because there are really few people coming in?
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Now, if the number of employees increase and the
Hmm.
number of visitors increase,
Hmm.
uh, let's say there are like hundreds of people coming into my office every day, will it be
Correct.
practically possible for the gatekeeper to check and approve every person who comes in?
Nope.
No, because
It'll be
if
too
everyone
much.
started, correct, so if everyone started going to the gatekeeper, then there'll be such a big backlog.
Hmm.
So what
Right.
do we do to ensure that there is no backlog? We end up issuing automated pass through, which kind of help the people pass through the gates.
Correct.
And people have their like those cards, right, with which they are able to go
The
in and out.
Yeah, the swipe cards. Right.
The swipe cards. Now what
Hmm.
happens because of the swipe cards? They don't have to take permission again and again,
Mm-hmm.
and only the new people who do not have the gate pass will go to the gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper can then address those people's concerns
Correct. Makes sense.
and then decide whether to allow them to go in or not.
Hmm.
That's exactly the role that critical filter plays. So
Okay.
let's say while I was growing up, I got constant positive reinforcement that I am good and capable.
Right.
Okay. Now this is a constant reinforcement. This becomes like a belief. This is like this information as a pass, which can go into the unconscious.
Correct.
Right? Now, whenever someone else comes and tells me that Nitin, you're good and you're capable, would my mind
Hmm.
reject the idea?
No, because it matches what I already hold to be true.
Perfect. Now, so basically, it just gets passed into the unconscious automatically, right? The conscious
Hmm.
mind doesn't need to intervene.
Hmm.
But if one day I make a mistake
Hmm.
and someone tells me that I'm a failure, or that I have a
Hmm.
thought in my conscious mind that says that I'm
Hmm.
a failure,
Hmm.
will that one time thought be
Hmm.
allowed to pass the critical filter into my unconscious?
No.
No, right? Because then that will be a
Hmm.
problem. Because the moment it reaches the
Hmm.
unconscious, because controls my not my automatic behaviors, will then start acting upon that thought. So there has to be some mechanism which will stop that thought from going into my unconscious,
Correct.
right? And that's where critical filter comes in. That the moment that thought reaches the critical filter, because it's not in sync with the underlying beliefs that were there, and the underlying
Hmm.
beliefs were that I'm good and capable. The
Hmm.
critical filter just rejects the idea, and that's the reason why you will notice that for some people who have strong positive beliefs, thought
Hmm.
restructuring happens naturally with them,
Hmm.
right? So,
Right.
in a way,
Right.
the critical filter is here protecting us,
Yes.
right? Now,
Hmm.
let's say that I was one of those people who was brought up by being constantly told you're not good enough or you're good for nothing.
Hmm. Right.
Now, what will happen? Wouldn't this become the past?
Yes. So that is the
Yes.
belief.
This is the belief. So every time someone uh, says you're not good enough, now my mind will just accept it simply because there's an existing past available for that information.
Correct.
But
Perfect.
what if I
Yes.
end up doing something good at one point and someone comes and tells me that Nitin, you're good and you're capable? What would I do?
I'll I'll not believe that person. I'll discard the idea maybe.
Correct. So many a times you will notice that when people do certain good stuff and you tell them that you have done a good job, they would actually
Hmm.
look at you feeling embarrassed and they will tell you, no, maybe it was just luck or it was just a fluke, right?
Hmm.
So even when you give them a positive suggestion, they don't accept it because the critical filter just rejects the idea. Their belief is I'm not good
Hmm.
enough. So anything that you say will well comes in the way.
Hmm. Right. So there are people you tell them that you're looking good or you're looking fit, and they'll be like, नहीं ऐसे ही लग रहा होगा, कपड़े आज दूसरे पहने होंगे. Even if you're complimenting them.
Perfect. And that's the reason why compliments don't even help them. Even if you try to give them compliments, at least initially, that doesn't help them change their opinion of themselves because their mind kind of keeps discarding that, the critical filter keeps discarding that suggestion that you're giving them. And because the suggestion is not even reaching the unconscious, how does the
Hmm.
unconscious act upon it?
Hmm. No, it won't be able to. Yeah, true, true. Correct, correct. So, Nitin, you said that if the information coming in does not match my belief or what is there in my critical filter, uh, it may get distorted or changed. So, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So when I say that it will get rejected, it's actually
Hmm.
true. It may get rejected or it may get distorted. And the
Hmm.
easiest way to explain that is using the terminology from neurolinguistic programming,
Hmm.
and that is generalization, deletion, and distortion.
Hmm.
Right? So our beliefs are like generalizations. You will
Hmm.
notice that belief statements generally have words like always, never,
Hmm.
no one,
Hmm.
everyone.
Hmm.
True. So let's say I
Right.
have a belief or a generalization that no one loves me.
Correct.
Now, if my wife tells and comes and tells me, I love you, can you make a
Hmm.
cup of tea for me?
Hmm.
I can't really accept I love you, right? Because it will be against my generalization, my belief.
Hmm.
I've kind of organized my entire life around my belief. So
Hmm.
accepting the contrary is not really an option immediately.
Hmm.
So what would I do? I would either not even hear the words I love you, which means I'm deleting that information,
Hmm.
right? And I would only hear the words, can you make a cup of tea for me? Which will kind of reinforce my original idea, no one loves me, but they still want me to do things for them,
Hmm. Correct.
right? And that's the reason you will notice, and that's actually an example of deletion, right? So that's where you will notice the two people having a conversation with each other. One
Hmm.
person saying, I said this, and the other person would say that I have not said it, or you have not said it. So now either one person is deleting information or the other person is hallucinating that they're saying it in their head.
Yeah, people would say, मैंने तो ऐसा बोला ही नहीं था, मैंने ऐसा कब बोला था?
Correct? So that's like an example of deletion.
Hmm.
Right? Now, what if I've heard the words I love you? Now I can't really delete it because I've sensorily observed it and I'm consciously aware of it.
Hmm.
So the next thing I may do is I may distort it, which means
Hmm.
I may end up telling myself, she doesn't
Hmm.
love me at all. She just wants me to make a cup of tea and therefore she told me I love you. So I'm actually
Hmm.
not accepting her suggestion still. I'm distorting it to fit into my
Hmm.
generalization that no one loves me,
Hmm.
right? So that's basically what happens to an information which is not in sync with your beliefs. And that's the reason why different people will perceive the same situation differently. That again is a
Hmm.
result of generalization, deletion, and distortion.
Right. That's like a brilliant insight, we why we behave the way we do and why we talk is the way we do. Before I ask you further questions, there are some questions here.
Hmm.
Uh, one person Prashanti says, where does subconscious come in all this?
All right. So Prashanti, there are the word subconscious is used in two different ways in different schools of thoughts. In many
Hmm.
schools, subconscious and unconscious is used synonymously. It's just that depending upon which school you're following and which country you're in,
Hmm.
generally speaking, that's where the difference comes in. And then there are
Hmm.
certain schools of thoughts where unconscious will be referred to unconscious the way we are referring to it right now, and the critical filter is used is instead called subconscious.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So the terminology, the usage of terminology depends upon which school of thought you're following. Basically, they're talking about three components. It's just that the exact terminology being used changes. But the most popular view is that the word unconscious and subconscious are used interchangeably, at least in hypnosis.
Right. Right. Atri Sharma Neetu says, what I feel that unresolved hurt and guilt becomes part of unconscious. That is why it comes at times and hinders.
So yes, unresolved hurt and guilt, because it's unresolved and you have experienced it, it's stored somewhere, right? And it's stored in your unconscious. Suppression would take place. So it's true that because of that suppressed information or that suppressed emotion, it will probably come back in the future and may act as a hindrance.
Correct. Correct. Unnati says, I agree. It's me. I always discard other views if it is positive. Another person says, disqualifying the positive. Okay. Rahul again asks how hypnosis can help this critical filter change or help unconscious perspective will to change.
So Rahul, that's actually a very good question because that's the key question that we need to answer, right? And that's what we are coming to in probably a couple of minutes. Just
Hmm.
before I answer a couple of other things that are remaining from what we were talking about.
Correct.
Okay?
So,
And
yeah,
huh. I hope this is clear for all of you. At least what we have discussed earlier about generalization, deletion, distortion, about critical filter, how the critical filter works, and then I can go ahead and answer that original question, which was about which is more powerful in the interplay between conscious mind, subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind, and the critical filter.
correct. Okay, there's another question. Then, why is it said that subconscious is an altered state of consciousness? Zenat का question है.
Okay. So again, Zenith, there, subconscious and unconscious are being used alternatively. And when people say it's an altered state of consciousness, that's actually true. Because we are also distinguishing between consciousness and conscious mind. So there is a distinction between conscious efforts and conscious awareness, and that's something that a lot of people kind of get confused between. When I am consciously putting an effort to restructure my thought, that's conscious effort. That's not just conscious awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say when I'm driving a car, I'm not putting a conscious effort to drive a car. It's not that I have to consciously calculate where is my steering, where is my gear, and then kind of I have to calculate the distance between the two, and then I have to put in conscious efforts to be able to take the hand from the steering to the gear. My
Hmm.
mind automatically knows that, and while I'm consciously aware of the fact that I'm driving and my hand is leaving the steering and it's going to the gear, it's still happening effortlessly. So when we talk about hypnosis, we are talking about an altered state of consciousness where you may be conscious, but you don't have to put in conscious efforts. The things that are happening are still happening naturally, effortlessly. When we talk about conscious mind doing things, you are actually consciously trying to do it. I hope that that makes it clear for you,
Yes.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So can we go ahead?
This, the moment I start framing
Hmm.
my question, is the belief system an entry card for unconscious stuff? Is
Correct. So that
Atri's question.
correct. So, Atri, that would be another way of putting it. That belief system becomes our entry card for unconscious stuff. And that's the reason why in REBT, when REBT talks about working with beliefs and changing beliefs, that's so important, because eventually it's those beliefs that are determining how your mind will allow that information to go in, whether it will go in or not, in which format will it go in, and how you will continue to perceive your life in future. Right? It's just that our way of working with the belief is slightly different, but the conceptual understanding is the same. The beliefs are extremely important.
Perfect. So
Hmm.
before I get another question, so now we understand critical filter, how it processes information. So can we go back to my question of the interplay between the critical filter, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and which one is the most powerful?
Perfect. So to explain this to you, let me take the example of smoking again, because that's what we were
Hmm.
at, right? So
Right,
as I
right.
said, when I smoke for the first time, I don't have an
Hmm.
old reference for smoking. So when I consciously choose to smoke, there is no belief in the critical filter that prevents the decision to be implemented by the unconscious, right?
Correct.
So I decide consciously. My unconscious
Hmm.
says no, but because there is no critical filter, I am able, with respect to smoking, I am actually able to overpower the unconscious based on my conscious choices.
Correct.
Right now, uh, the problem is when I choose to smoke over and over again,
Hmm.
because it's happening repetitively. That decision now no longer remains a part of the conscious; it becomes a part of the critical filter.
Right.
So once
Yes.
it becomes a part of the critical filter, when I consciously choose I don't want to smoke, the information reaches the critical filter. The critical filter uses the old reference point and realizes rubbish. You have been smoking for all this time thinking that smoking will be useful. It will be, what should I say? It will help you become a part of group. It helps you relax. And now all of a sudden, one day you tell me that you don't want to smoke. Rubbish. So what does it do? It discards the idea. So the
Correct.
thought doesn't even become a part of the unconscious.
The thought
Now,
to quit.
the thought to quit. So if the unconscious doesn't even receive that thought, that instruction, how does it follow it?
Hmm.
So
Correct.
while the
Makes sense.
conscious is more powerful than the unconscious, the critical filter is more powerful than the conscious. And that's what comes in the way of us consciously being able to influence our unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
It does make sense. So the critical filter itself underwent a change because of the repetitive smoking behavior, right?
Correct. Because I chose that decision over and over again, that became like
Correct.
an acceptable behavior. It almost is like an entry pass. That's why when I smoke, it should be allowed to go in. When I decide otherwise, then my critical filter rejects the idea and I go back to my original behavior again.
Wow. Okay. Got it.
Right? That said,
Right.
what if the critical filter is developed in a faulty way? Which is in this case, right? That I have made a decision, but probably the decision doesn't work for me any longer. Now
Okay.
that decision
Explain.
now that decision itself or that information itself is stored in the unconscious. I've repetitively accepted it and it's become a part of the unconscious.
Correct.
So technically my critical filter is actually being powered by the proof that it receives from the unconscious.
Hmm.
So if
True.
I want to change the critical filter,
Hmm.
one way is I can confront with the critical filter, I can confront with my beliefs, but that's kind of a bit of a, a tricky scenario, because a lot of times when we confront a client, the
Hmm.
confrontation at times makes the client feel even more convinced that they're right or that you don't understand them.
Yeah, in fact, a client may even tell you कि आप नहीं करते हो, आपको क्या पता?
Correct. So therefore, while confrontation may work in some cases, it also has its own flip side. So
Right.
alternatively, since we know that the critical filter is being powered by the unconscious,
Hmm.
if we had a process to be able to bypass the critical filter,
Hmm.
go to the unconscious and directly create a change in the unconscious, would that help me change my critical filter?
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
Yes, it should.
correct. So between the critical filter and the unconscious, it's actually the unconscious that is more powerful. So the way the equation turns out, between conscious and unconscious, conscious more powerful. Between
Hmm.
conscious and critical filter more powerful. Between
Hmm.
critical filter and unconscious
Hmm.
is more powerful. So it's like a brilliant system of checks and balances,
Hmm.
right?
No one part is more powerful than the other, right?
Correct. So it's just in with respect to what you are comparing it to. But overall,
Hmm.
each component of the system is equally important. And the reason I wanted to ask this, or I asked these questions to all of you, was also because a lot of people, when they come to me, when we talk about hypnosis, they tell me that we have heard unconscious is more powerful and that conscious is not important at all. Please don't discredit any part of your mind. All parts of your mind are playing a role and they're equally important. It's just that you need to understand what their interplay is between them.
Right.
I hope that makes sense,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Right. Prashanti says if the conscious is more powerful, then why is it that we are not able to do things we want to drink? Is it because the filter stops us?
Perfect. So that's the answer that we have already given. That
That's
even though
yes.
between the conscious and the conscious is more powerful, but the information needs to go into the unconscious, and the critical filter just stops that information from going in, and that's why it's difficult to change your old behaviors, or old habits, or old beliefs.
Hmm. Hmm. So it will totally depend upon the context that we are considering in that moment, right?
Correct.
Or the mind is working upon.
Correct. So actually, the question that I asked, which is more powerful, is actually a trick question. There is no answer. All parts are equally important and equally powerful. It just depends upon what is it that you are comparing it with respect to, right?
Yeah, I
And
think
the final thing is that if we have a process to bypass the critical filter and update the unconscious mind, then that can help us change our critical filter, which basically means that we are able to change our beliefs and we are able to create the changes that we want to create in our life.
right. I think Nitin, that's a very important idea or concept because there's so much literature around power of the subconscious mind and so much discussion around the unconscious mind. And while we realize now that it does matter a lot and plays a vital role, it is not to say that the conscious can be totally disregarded or it has no role to play.
So, and that's the reason why we actually talk about the eclectic approach. Because what happens is otherwise is when you're following one approach, we are bound to say certain things that are falling in line with our approach. If I'm only using hypnosis, then I'm bound to say subconscious or unconscious is more powerful because my entire promotions depend on that. Right? If I'm following an alternate approach which focuses more on cognitive work, then I have to say that it's all about conscious choices because my entire work revolves around that. So when you use an eclectic approach, it gives you the flexibility to actually see the mind in a more objective way, in a way in which you're not biased by the processes that you're following.
Right. And then you're not also limited to those processes. Am I right?
Correct.
Perfect. Perfect. So, okay. How do we, Nisha says, how do we change the critical filter? And Bhavini says, is hypnosis the only way to bypass the filter and change the unconscious mind?
Okay. So, Bhavini, one of the definitions of hypnosis is that a hypnotic process is a process that will help you bypass the critical filter. And for the unconscious to be in a receptive state, you have to bypass the critical filter. Now, you may not call it hypnosis. And as I said in the earlier episodes, that a lot of times people use other processes which they don't call hypnosis, but they're still all based on hypnotic principles. Whether you're talking about deep rapport building, whether you're talking about meditation, whenever you're using a process to make people more receptive, in a way in which their unconscious is receptive to you, by definition, that becomes hypnosis. You may choose to call it by any name.
Right. Right. So, Nitin, where does hypnosis come into play?
All right. So, as I said, where does hypnosis come into play? Um, Hypnosis is, as I mentioned, a process to, from a process point of view, any hypnotic technique would be a technique which will help you bypass the critical filter.
Okay. And talking of techniques, most people, when they think of hypnosis, the first impression they have is that of a dangling pendulum or a pocket watch. And the second impression that comes to them generally is of a deep trance like state. So what is this? And is this hypnosis? What is its relationship with hypnosis?
Okay. So, Mamta, pendulum is one of the ways of inducing a hypnotic state, and deep trance phenomena is generally the effect of a hypnotic state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
But there are multiple ways of inducing a hypnotic state, and there are multiple effects that we can create in a hypnotic state. These are just examples of what can be used or what can be done.
Okay. So are you saying that using a pendulum, one can actually induce a hypnotic state?
Well, as I said, it is one of the techniques, but just one technique, and there are many other techniques, and it's probably one of the more outdated ones.
Oh, so can you tell me a little more about, hypnotic techniques?
Okay. So let's quickly summarize what we know about hypnosis, and then we go to the hypnotic
Correct.
techniques, because then I'll build it up from there. So
Correct.
we already understand now that hypnosis is a state of hyperreceptivity, where our
Hmm.
unconscious is more receptive, and
Hmm.
the way to make the unconscious more receptive is to bypass the critical filter, right?
Correct.
Now,
Right.
one of the ways of bypassing the critical filter, which means one of the techniques in hypnosis, is
Hmm.
bombarding the mind with a lot of information, so much so that the mind is not able to process that information at all. It almost
Okay.
is like you're creating a crisis like situation for the mind. And when we are in
Okay.
crisis, fight and flight triggers, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
There are instinctive responses.
Correct.
Now, who controls the instinctive responses?
Unconscious mind.
Perfect. So, we have an entry into the unconscious when we have bombarded the mind with a lot of information. Now,
Hmm.
this is exactly what is being done with pendulum.
Okay.
So, when you have someone with a pendulum in front of you, what do? They keep a pendulum in front of you. Then they would ask you to stare at the pendulum. The pendulum
Hmm.
moves. You have to keep your head still, but the eyes have to move, right?
Right.
You are focusing on the pendulum, more messages,
Hmm.
bombarding of information. The
Hmm.
hypnotist is telling you a sequence of things that you have to listen to.
Correct.
Your eyes begin to get tired.
Yes.
Now, when all of this is happening together,
Hmm.
there would come a point where your mind would say, enough, right? I can't take so much. Your eyes
Hmm.
will start drooping a bit. They will start kind of, they would want to close because they're so tired now. And
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
exactly when the hypnotist notices this and tells
Hmm.
you, all right, now that you're noticing the heaviness in your eyes, just allow
Hmm.
yourself to close your eyes and relax.
Hmm.
Now, when you hear that suggestion, what do?
You
You
close
close
your
your eyes.
eyes.
Correct, because the system wants to feel more comfortable. And you're accepting that suggestion because it is providing you relief from that
Hmm.
overload that you are experiencing.
Correct.
Right? So this overloading of mind is one way of inducing a hypnotic state. In fact, there are a lot of meditations. If you have been through Art of Living, Sudarshan Kriya is a classic example of overloading the mind by observing your breath, changing the breathing pattern, and then allowing you to relax.
Correct.
Osho's dynamic meditation is another example of this.
Hmm.
Right?
True.
When you are going to a salesperson, oh, a lot of salespeople use this in conversational models of hypnosis, where let's say you wanted to buy a mobile phone,
Hmm.
you went to the shop, and it was important that you buy the mobile phone immediately. right?
Okay.
Now you go into the
Hmm.
shop and you notice that there are so many phones, all of the same price range, having the same feature set, uh, some of them even from the same brand,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and it's very confusing to really think which one to buy in that moment.
Correct.
Now what happens there? Your mind is overloaded.
Yes.
The shopkeeper then tells you, sir, ma'am, I'm telling you in your budget for the features that you're looking for, take this particular piece, you will bless me. What do we end up doing?
We buy that because, I mean, we do have to buy that day. And it seems that that person knows the best because that is what he's doing day in and day out. And we're already confused. So we end up buying what they suggest to us. I
Perfect.
have
So
done that.
basically, correct. So basically, it's just providing relief to us that there's too much of information. I have to make a decision. I'm not able to make it. In that
Hmm.
confused state, if someone else makes it for me, who I think is
Hmm.
in a position of authority, oh, it makes complete sense.
Hmm. Or as you said, relief. That's the right word.
Perfect. Right. So,
Right.
uh, so that's the basic idea that when we bombard someone with a lot of information, and if the
Hmm.
final suggestion acts as a relief, then the person
Hmm.
ends up accepting it. The chances of accepting it is very high. So that's one
Correct.
way of inducing a hypnotic state. But you also have to remember that this is a very short term effect, which means that if the person buys that phone and if they don't receive the benefit from that phone, will they ever come
Hmm.
back to you again?
No. No.
No, right?
Hmm.
So it's not just that you're giving them a suggestion that they're accepting because it's providing them relief in that moment. That relief
Hmm.
needs to be such that it also has a long term benefit for them. Because if it has, then the next time they come to you, they're naturally
Hmm.
in a receptive state because of their past experience with you.
Right.
Right? So I hope that makes sense. That bombarding the mind with a lot of information and then providing it with relief is one of the ways of inducing a hypnotic state.
Correct. Makes complete sense. Yes.
Now, the next process to induce a hypnotic state would be uh, by helping people get into in touch with intense emotions, either positive or negative.
Okay.
Okay? Now, remember, these emotions are connected to experiences.
Yes.
These experiences are stored in the unconscious,
Perfect.
right?
Yes.
So, if I have been able to intensely get in touch with those emotions, that means I have been able to access that memory vividly.
Correct.
In short, I have got access to the unconscious,
Got it. Yes.
right? So,
Right.
helping people get in touch with deeper emotions is also one of the ways of inducing a hypnotic state.
Correct. Makes sense. Yes.
Another process to induce a hypnotic state is mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you know of this or not, but hypnosis was a word coined by James Brett, and it
Hmm.
meant sleep. And then somewhere down the line, he realized that hypnosis is not equal to sleep; it's more about focused attention, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
did try
Mm-hmm.
to coin a term called monoidism, which basically is about being focused on something specific. But the word hypnosis had
Oh.
caught on, and we are kind of still using the same terminology till today.
Oh.
Now that's
Okay.
how mindfulness comes in, because with mindfulness, what you're doing is you're helping
Hmm.
people become, or you're helping your client
Hmm.
focus on specific aspects of their experience.
Hmm.
You're
Correct.
literally training them to focus on certain things. And once they're
Hmm.
able to focus on those things, you can move their focus from their body sensations to the
Hmm.
thoughts
Hmm.
or the suggestions that you're giving them. Because they are
Okay.
able to focus on those thoughts completely, their mind is
Hmm.
completely engrossed in those thoughts, right?
Right.
They're in which is in a receptive state. It's almost like a trance-like state where you're only focusing on one thing, which is the thing in your head right now.
Right.
And that's
True.
also where relaxation comes into play. So a lot of times when people use relaxation to induce hypnotic states,
Mm-hmm.
what really happens is while you're inducing a relaxed state, you're actually making people become mindful of the relaxation sensation in their body.
Hmm.
And once they are more mindful of those sensations, then you start
Hmm.
focusing or shifting their focus on the suggestions that you're giving them, which is the same thing as I mentioned earlier with mindfulness.
Right.
I hope that's making sense.
Yes. So far, so
Yeah.
good.
Perfect. And while I said that relaxation can help us induce a hypnotic state, to be true, that's only
Hmm.
effective for people who are able to get into relaxed state quickly. then you can use
Hmm.
relaxation to induce a hypnotic state. But for certain
Okay.
people for whom relaxation or calmness doesn't happen naturally, or they
Hmm.
find it difficult to relax and become calm, then
Hmm.
using relaxation to induce a hypnotic state is not a good idea. Then you will
Hmm.
induce a hypnotic state first, and then in a hypnotic state, give them suggestions to experience relaxation. So, relaxation can both be a technique to induce a hypnotic state and can also be an
Hmm.
experience that you're creating for clients in a hypnotic state.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
lastly, there are a lot of other techniques. I'm just covering one more because that's kind of important.
Hmm.
So, lastly, since hypnosis is about receptivity, one
Hmm.
of the best ways of inducing it is called pacing and leading.
Hmm.
Pacing means when you begin with the person uh,
Hmm.
from where he or she is. To be
Hmm.
to put it more simply, you actually help them focus on their current experience, what they're experiencing right now,
Hmm.
which is similar to mindfulness,
Yes.
and then
Very
lead
much.
them to what you want them to focus on.
Oh. Okay.
So that is pacing and leading. So, for example, when I tell you, as you hear the sounds of my voice, that you're listening to
Hmm.
the sounds of my voice, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You may be able to notice the sensations you're experiencing when you're sitting on the chair.
Okay.
So what I've
Okay.
done is you were not focusing on the sensations earlier. You were focusing
Hmm.
on my voice. I brought your awareness to
Hmm.
what you were already on. Moved your awareness towards the sensations in your body.
Correct.
So that's pacing and leading,
Hmm.
right? I hope this is clear.
Yes. Yes, it is. So, as you hear, my voice is the current experience that I was in, right? So
That's
you were
pacing.
pacing by saying that.
Correct.
And when you said the rest of it, so that is where you led me, right?
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, got it.
Right? Brilliant. Now, to summarize this, any good hypnotic process would
Hmm.
actually combine most of these techniques that I've mentioned earlier together. So
Okay.
many hypnotic processes would begin by helping people focus on something specific,
Hmm.
then being aware of their, then overloading their mind by a lot of message units,
Hmm.
mixing it with pacing and leading,
Hmm.
helping them realize that they are beginning to get tired or they are overloaded, and then providing
Hmm.
them suggestions for relief, which becomes the lead, eventually leading them into a deeper state of relaxation or helping them connect to a more intense emotional experience.
Right.
Okay? Now, just to
Right.
clarify, while this is a format, obviously which steps you emphasize more on will depend
Hmm.
upon the client and the client's responses to the process.
Okay.
So, as someone who
Good.
uses hypnosis, it is not just about knowing these techniques, but being able to apply them while being able to observe their impact on maximizing the techniques for the client.
Ah. Right. Correct.
Now, these are just the techniques to induce a hypnotic state, and these are just conceptual understanding. To be
Hmm.
true, any number of techniques can be created based on this understanding. And a good practitioner, ideally, would be able to create a technique for the client during the process rather than sticking to a standard process that they will use with the client.
Right. And Nitin, the kind of customization that we are talking about would, that would be a truly person centric approach in therapy, wouldn't it be? Because we are actually literally customizing everything
True,
for the client or the change that he wants to achieve or the outcome that they wish, right?
true.
Perfect. Perfect. That makes sense. That makes sense. Nitin, before we go ahead, some questions here. There's a compliment for you. Nisha says you're too good.
Thank
um,
you.
okay, I'm going back to uh, Unnati had asked at one point. So consciously, how can we change our beliefs? How can we accept others' compliments or views?
Okay. So, one way is by consciously becoming aware of the beliefs that we have. That's the first step. If you're only trying to work with it consciously. Okay? Though that doesn't mean that you're not using unconscious. I'm just saying that you're not using hypnotic processes, but eventually you will have to work with the unconscious through the conscious processes. So
Hmm.
that's where your first step will be to become aware of your beliefs. If you're aware of
Hmm.
your beliefs, then probably a conscious thought restructuring process or a confrontation of the belief may work for you, and that may be good enough. Also, looking for
Hmm.
exceptions will be another way in which the more exceptions you look for, the more difficult it becomes for the mind to stick to the beliefs, right? Because there are too many exceptions available.
Hmm.
So that's another way of working with the mind, with the entire process consciously. You will be
Hmm.
able to do it as long as you're aware of your belief. The challenge that we face at times is a lot of times we are not even aware of our beliefs.
Hmm.
Now, if you're not aware of your beliefs, you'll have to use some or the other process to be able to become aware of those beliefs. Now, you may call it guided visualization, you may call it imagination, you may call it deep relaxation, whatever name you want to give it, but those processes will become important. And for us, all of those processes are hypnosis, irrespective of what name we give it.
Correct.
Okay? So just to
Like,
summarize, if you have the awareness of the belief, then
hmm.
confrontation and thought restructuring at a conscious level may be enough. If you don't have the awareness of the belief, then it actually makes a lot more sense to go through the alternate processes.
Correct. Atri Sharma Neetu says, if client is stubborn, doesn't want to change his belief system consciously and unconsciously, how can we work with them?
My question would be, why is the client coming to us for therapy then? If the client is coming to us for therapy, that means there's some problem that they're facing, right? Correct. So when we actually work with clients, we don't really talk about beliefs to them directly because that's asking for too much.
Hmm.
What we really do instead is
Hmm.
we would I would ask the client that what is the problem that you're trying to resolve, what is the change that you want to create, and is that change important enough for you or not.
Hmm.
Once they say yes, then we make them go through a process where the belief change happens as a part of the process. I don't actually have to talk to the client about the belief separately, and that's probably what makes our life easier. And that's the reason I've been talking about eclectic approach. The reason why I'm not really saying that we need to use only hypnosis or that we need to only use REBT or only use cognitive approaches is because you have to understand that you're working with different kinds of clients, and not all clients respond to all your processes equally, right? Now,
Correct.
because I know that a lot of times when you talk to clients about their beliefs and the moment they are consciously interacting to you about those beliefs, they have their own resistances coming up. I actually prefer working with it in a context that I tell them, all right, if you want to change, we have processes to help you change. Would you like to go through those processes? And the clients end up saying yes to me. Now, if I have to help the client consciously become aware of the belief, if that's necessary because the client already is aware of those beliefs or is also wanting to get a intellectual understanding of them, then eventually I leave that as an option to the client. That now that you have realized that these beliefs are stopping you from creating the necessary change,
Hmm.
right? You have an option. You can either choose to change the belief and create the change that you want to create, or you may choose to stick with the belief, but then that will also mean that your current behavior or the current situations will continue. Now that choice the client has to make, and I'm happy with whatever choice the client makes. Though, as I said, I've never really had a client who would then tell me that no, I don't want to resolve my problem. They all turn around and they're like, yeah, if that's the choice, then I would rather want to resolve the problem that I have.
Perfect. I think that answers your question. Jyoti says, can the process of generating the critical filter itself be made into a conscious process? That is, if you are more aware consciously of what rules or beliefs you are beginning to form in life, can the process of critical filter formation be made into a conscious process by choice?
So that's what mindfulness attempts to do. The challenge that we face is that a lot of our beliefs are developed when we are too young and too small. Okay,
Hmm.
we have been receiving information from people in our family since the time we were conceived, not even born, even before that, since the time we were conceived, right? Now, there's
Hmm.
really no way for us to consciously be able to decide at that point of time what beliefs we want to accept, what information we want to accept. So, once we are adults and once we have been able to clear off our old baggage with respect to beliefs, yes, through mindfulness, you will be able to consciously become more in control of what beliefs you're forming and how those beliefs are influencing your life.
Hmm.
But as a child, we are asking for too much. I hope that answers your question. I know it doesn't really leave us with a very happy picture in the end. That as a child we are so influenced, but the truth is that's the reason why parenting is a full time job. Every word that you speak to a child while the child is growing up can make or break the child. And especially if you're using those words repetitively, then well,
Okay. Somebody says can't get the fourth one. I think they're talking about the fourth technique of inducing hypnosis because I think around that time they asked that question.
so I'll summarize probably in the end the techniques quickly. So that becomes
Perfect.
easier because even I don't
Perfect.
remember which is the fourth one that I spoke.
Okay. Nisha says I usually go this way. Nisha, sorry. To what are you referring? If you could explain. Can you explain with the example of anger? Uh, explain
Okay,
what?
explain with the example of anger. I'm assuming explain the whole phenomena of hypnosis,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so I'll tell you what we will do with hypnosis when it comes to anger. Uh, I would first use the processes to be able to induce the client in a receptive state. And I've already discussed the processes with you, right?
Right. Hmm.
In that state, next, I will first ask the client to get in touch with the past experience that they've had, which will be contrary to anger. So let's say right now they feel anger in front of their boss. I would have asked them consciously first, what would you like to feel instead of anger? And let's say the client says that I want to experience calmness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help them go into a deep hypnotic state. There, I will help them get in touch with a past experience where they have experienced calmness. So now they have experienced that calmness,
Correct.
right? I would then create an association between that calmness and the situation where they were earlier feeling angry. So
Mm-hmm.
I would now connect this through suggestions and through imagination and through future visualizations, how the client is able to experience the same calmness with the same boss in future. Now, what will happen is if the calmness is stronger than anger, because they can't coexist, generally the client starts experiencing calmness with the same boss in future. They don't experience that anger again, unless the anger is about something which is ongoing. In which case, I will first consciously sit with the client to strategize what will be the best way of them being able to handle the ongoing conflict. Then I will use hypnosis to first release the past baggage of anger that they're holding on to. Okay? And there are processes of catharsis that we'll talk about when we are talking about psychoanalysis, because some of those processes will come in over there, right? And then I would help them experience that calmness, and in that calm state help them apply the strategies that we discussed consciously, so that in future when they are in front of their boss, not only are they experiencing calmness, but in that calm state they are also naturally able to apply the strategy that will help them resolve the conflict that they have with their boss.
Hmm.
I hope Rahul that sorry, I hope Amit that answers your question.
Amit, do let us know if that does. Okay. Atri says this is about client not wanting to change consciously, unconsciously. Client come with some problems complaining about others, but not accepting his side.
So that's perfect. So, Atri, what I do in that is we have a model called Flip that we follow. What because if I get into explaining that model right now, that will probably take us half an hour to explain that. So, what I am going to do is either I'll move to explain that model tomorrow, or I would leave a link to that model. There's a YouTube video on the entire model in the comments right now, so you can check that model out. But just to summarize, what we do is I don't actually tell the client that they have to take responsibility to begin with, because if the client could take that responsibility, they wouldn't come to me for therapy. It's as simple as that. And that's one of the things where I've noticed a lot of people, when they're sticking to one mode of therapy, they get stuck, because a lot of therapies begin by asking the client that you need to take responsibility for what's happening in your life. Now
Hmm.
conceptually that idea is true, that eventually the client has to take responsibility for their uh, for the problems that they have in their life. But
Hmm.
if you saying it would help them
Hmm.
take that responsibility, they wouldn't even need to come to you. The idea is that your therapy process should help them take that responsibility in a way in which they end up taking that responsibility, and they realize later on that yes, it was all about me. You don't have to ask them to accept it. Your therapy is supposed to make them realize it, and that's the difference. It's not that the client has to consciously agree with that. The client has to, during the process, realize it's their responsibility, and that's where the right processes come into play. Okay. And with
Okay.
hypnosis, that can be done. So, for example, when I spoke about this, and the client says that, Nitin, let's go back to the anger example. The client said, Nitin, my boss is someone who's just not willing to listen to me. And
Hmm.
that's why I get angry. So, it's my boss's fault,
Hmm.
right? I'll tell the client, all right, so now that you feel it's your boss's fault, is there someone else in your office who probably has a way of getting around your boss's behavior, the way he behaves right now? And in every office, there's at least one person who knows how to get things done from the boss.
Hmm.
Right? The moment the client says, "Yeah, I have this one person who I don't know how, but he's able to get things done from the boss." So I'll tell
Hmm.
the client, "All right, I want you to close your eyes, go back to the time when you have noticed him interacting with the boss, and identify what does he do, which is different from what you do."
Hmm.
Now they identify those strategies,
Hmm.
right? Now the moment they identify that strategy, they'll ask the client, "In what emotional state would you be able to apply these strategies also?"
Hmm.
And generally the client would say, "You know what, if I were calm, then probably I'll be able to do all of this." But वो शक्ल देख के गुस्सा आ जाता है, उसके बाद फिर ऐसे भूल जाता हूँ,
Hmm.
right? So now that I know what the strategy is and what the calmness is, what is it that they're looking for, I don't need to tell the client to take responsibility for their problem. I can just guide them in that state. I can ask them to go back into the memory where they felt calm, and then from there they can experience that calmness, and they can imagine themselves applying that new strategy with the boss in that state of calmness. And in their life, when they're able to go and they apply this new strategy in that state of calmness, which is natural and automatic, they come back and they would literally automatic. The next session, the client comes and tells me that, Nitin, I kept thinking it's my boss's fault, but I realized you
Hmm.
never worked with my boss, you only worked with me, and yet I was able to resolve my problem. So I'm not really sure whether it was my boss's fault, or it's just that I did not realize that I still have to take responsibility for my emotions and my responses. So for me, the idea is not to begin with the client taking responsibility. My idea is whatever the client tells us, we
Hmm.
pace the client and we eventually help them reach a place where they realize it's their responsibility. They don't have to accept it, they have to realize it. And that's the difference that we create with the eclectic approach that we are following.
Perfect.
Atri,
I
I
think
hope that
that.
that answers your question. So while I will explain flip probably tomorrow, but I hope that explains the question that you had.
Okay. Bhavya says fourth technique is pacing and leading. Thank you, Bhavya. But Nisha, I think is referring to when we said that we can create customized techniques during the process. So that is what she was referring to when she said, "What's the fourth thing?" She couldn't understand.
All right.
What do you mean by
So
customizing?
So customizing is, for example, the example that I took right now. So pasting and leading is
Hmm.
a format, right?
Hmm.
Now, what I've done is rather than confronting the client, I've asked the client, all right, what is the source of the problem? The
Hmm.
client told me it's my boss. So I have not discredited that idea.
Hmm.
I have then asked them, all right, do you know of someone in your office who knows how to get things done from the boss?
Hmm.
So what I've done is, even without telling him to realize that there are things that he can do,
Hmm.
I have brought him into that point of thinking, and he's actually following me because he's thinking about the person and he's giving me a answer, and he's telling me that yes, Nitin, there's this particular person, right?
Hmm.
So the fact that they are already thinking on those lines and they are not
Hmm.
resisting it, doesn't that itself tell me that they are in a hypnotic state? They may not have their eyes closed, but I've been able to
Hmm.
create a customized process for that client simply because I understood what I was doing with the client.
Right.
I hope that clarifies what I mean by customizing the process.
Correct. And if they are following that chain of thought, then they are in that. That's a evidence that they are in that receptive state, right?
Perfect. So for us, our definition of hypnosis is this: follow the suggestion that you're giving them, and they are able to continue on that journey with you without any conflict, without any internal struggle. Whether their eyes are open, whether their eyes are closed, whether you think they're in a deep relaxed state or not, all of that are just byproducts. That's not hypnosis. We can create those effects with hypnosis, but hypnosis is purely a state of receptivity, and you can create customized processes to induce the client in that state.
Correct. Makes sense. Zenith is asking, a client who was enjoying all the moments. coming to movies, but after a few years, the client started crying in during sensitive scenes in movies. The client doesn't have a problem in his life, so what can we say about this?
All right. So what happens is at times, I'll probably again take this with an example tomorrow morning. Sorry, tomorrow
Hmm.
in the episode, and explain this
Hmm.
in detail. But I'm giving you a short, quick answer so that we can at least clarify this. So what
Hmm.
happens at times is that while we have certain repressed memories, which we may not be aware of, and which are like covered right now, so they are not really influencing or coming in the way of our lives, and we are not getting triggered by them. But there can be
Hmm.
specific triggers that may start uh, making that repressed memory more active. So it may remain repressed, but still becoming active. It's starting to influence you emotionally, right?
Hmm.
And that's the reason why over a period of time, the same things that earlier did not affect us may start affecting us, because those things that were stored in your unconscious were latent, were passive earlier. Something in your
Hmm.
life or something in the client's life made that, kind of triggered that, made it more active now. And even while the client is not consciously aware of it, it's beginning to influence the client's life.
Right.
I
I
hope
think
that
that
answers your questions, Zinat.
yes. Okay. Uh, Please explain it completely tomorrow too, says Atri Sharma. So I think Nitin, you'll have to describe
Sure.
that model that you were talking.
Correct. And I'll begin with an example tomorrow of a case where people did not have a problem earlier, and then over a period of time, they started having that problem, and how with hypnosis you were able to work with that particular client.
Right.
Right.
So Nitin, we have already overshot our uh, pre-decided time limit. So what do you suggest we do?
So I would suggest that we probably follow it up with the session tomorrow. So in tomorrow's
Right.
session again, we will talk about hypnosis, but we'll also talk about, along with hypnosis, specific examples or cases from hypnosis. We will also
Hmm.
talk about applying hypnosis with other therapies, and why the word hypnotherapy is kind of misleading. There's really nothing called as hypnotherapy to be true. Okay, that's a misleading word. And why is that the
Hmm.
case? And also why there are so many myths, misconceptions, why people don't really consider hypnosis to be scientific. All of those are things that we will take in detail in tomorrow's episode, right? And
Perfect.
then from day after
Perfect.
tomorrow onwards, we'll start focusing on individual approaches to psychotherapy. So we'll talk about behavioral psychology, cognitive psychology, and how they can be combined with hypnosis in each of the episodes.
Perfect. Perfect. So we'll have the second part of today's episode as tomorrow's episode. And if you have any questions, you can keep asking us, or you can bring them with you tomorrow to the session. I would request everybody to spread the word about this series in the mental health community, so that other professionals can also benefit from it. Right? Uh, Nitin, would you like to add something?
Uh, yeah, and also if you can just do a watch party, or you can share it with your friends, your colleagues, and that will be really useful for us, and that will be interesting for us.
Yep.
That's about it, and I hope that you're enjoying this season and you're enjoying this episodes that we are doing. uh, do remember that while we are talking about hypnosis today, we are going to take up every approach to psychotherapy, or most approaches to psychotherapy, in each of the episodes. So if you have specific questions about other approaches also, for example, if you have questions
Hmm.
about cognitive approach, or if you have questions about behavioral psychology, do post us in our comments, so that we will address them when we reach the relevant episode.
Perfect. So thank you, Nitin. Thank you so much for being patient and answering all those questions that we have. And
Thank you,
thank you,
Mumta,
everyone, for
for hosting
joining.
us, and thank you all of you for being a part of this session.
Yes.
I
So
hope you have
good
enjoyed
night.
it and you have found it useful.
Yes. So good night for now. Signing out. See you tomorrow, same time, 10 p.m. on Facebook.
Thank you. Bye bye.